strategies and whatnot, just because they don't immediately happen doesn't mean they're not going to. Being directionally correct is more important. And all Bitcoin pairs have been trending down since 2021, suggesting this is all part of the same cycle. As crazy as that sounds, like the devaluation of all Bitcoin pairs today is part of the same cycle that began the devaluation of all Bitcoin pairs back in 2021. Again, I get that that's a hard narrative to buy, but the chart shows you that all Bitcoin pairs are oscillators at best, and therefore they will likely go to the range lows eventually. Meaning that all Bitcoin pairs should drop another 35% altcoins against Bitcoin. Now, if the Fed changes monetary policy and they still haven't gone to the range lows, I might be willing to change my mind on that. But if I'm being honest with you, if the Fed were to pivot before all Bitcoin pairs go to the range lows, you might see all Bitcoin pairs rally, but I think that the Fed would likely have to reverse course on their monetary policy, and still you would eventually see all Bitcoin pairs go down there. So I'm still operating in the assumption that the most likely outcome for all Bitcoin pairs is to go to the range lows, and I think that Ethereum finally going home will allow that. Now, technically, quote unquote, home for Ethereum is right around $1,500 to $1,600. Okay, technically, I mean, it's right around $1,500 to $1,600. The dollar amount changes basically every day because it's a function of, it operates as a function of time, but around $1,500 to $1,600. The lower part of the regression band is all the way down at around $1,000, right? Around 1,000. Now, what's interesting is that for Ethereum last cycle, you basically had, you know, a macro higher low, right? Remember that 10x change? This low down there was around 120, which is why I've also suggested that, you know, it's possible that Ethereum could eventually go down to $1,200. But if it does go down there, it might not happen immediately. It could be a process. If it were to happen immediately, I think that would actually be an easier market to navigate, because actually what happened in 2019 was that it didn't go down there immediately. ETH first fell into the regression band down to about 160. So if you're thinking about that 10x move, that would put it around 1,600. Then quantitative tightening ended. Ethereum rallied from 1,600 back up to, or sorry, from 160 up to around 220. And then it eventually faded down to the lower part of the regression band. So I don't know if it's going to take the same amount of time. You know, obviously you could argue that since the uptrend lasted this time a lot longer, maybe it takes longer to get deeper into the regression band. But I don't even know if it has to play out like that, because one of the realities of markets is that the markets generally take the stairs up and the elevator down, right? It's sort of a slow process going up, and then when the market goes down, it can just be a quick capitulation. So one of the things that I've learned about it is, focusing on explaining what process has to occur, I think is much more useful. That way, it's not about when it happens. It's just saying, hey, whenever this does happen, then the next part of the process can play out, right? So, for instance, like ETH Bitcoin. The idea of when does it bottom? Well, we know last cycle it didn't bottom until the Fed pivoted from away from quantitative tightening. That didn't happen until after ETH USD broke down, which that's what's happening right now. Now, back then, when ETH USD did break down, right, when it did break down, how many weeks did it take exactly? I guess you could argue it took about 3 to 4 weeks, about a month or so. This breakdown by ETH USD really started about late February, so the argument could be that maybe another week or two, which is interesting because that's when the Fed's next meeting is next week. So, you know, if ETH goes to that $1,500 to $1,600 mark, and then the Fed pivots away from quantitative tightening, if it follows last cycle, then you might actually see a rally by Ethereum on the other side of March options expiration back above 2,000. I think the tough part really deciphering is, you know, will Ethereum, you know, assuming it does go home, you know, more fully. I mean, you could already argue it's kind of already there, to be completely honest. But, you know, if it were to go to like 1,500 to 1,600, does it make a deeper move into the regression band, right? Does it go all the way down to around 1,000 like it did last cycle and like it did the cycle before that? And that's kind of the harder part. If Ethereum doesn't go down to the lower part of the regression band soon, then my guess is that on the other side of March options expiration, especially as you get out into April, there would be some form of a counter trend rally, even like maybe how you had in 2019. The other thing that's kind of hard to decipher is that I know a lot of people want the Fed to end quantitative tightening, and they very well could in March, but if you read the most recent FOMC minutes, sort of the median forecast is that they won't end quantitative tightening until the summer, about mid-year. So, you know, a lot of it just kind of depends on how long they want to draw this thing out. Pain in the markets is ultimately what is needed to durably get inflation under control. You know, you can't really solve the inflation problem in a durable manner without having pain in the markets. And so I do think there's some level of recognition that everyone needs to have that, like, in order to get to where a lot of people want the markets to be, Ethereum has to go where they don't want it to go. It was just like in 2019. I mean, like, I definitely in